If we're talking about introversion, part of the reason why it's so complicated is because it combines with all these other different aspects of your personality. So each introvert is going to be totally different, and it's like more of a spectrum. So you have some introverts who are closer to the ambivert extrovert side, some who are just like very, very introverted, and it can change as you get older. To get really technical about it, extroverts are very sensitive to dopamine. So, they need like a lot more of it. So they need a lot more interaction, a lot more stimulation. Whereas introverts are more sensitive to this other hormone called like acetylcholine or something. And so we get a little bit of stimulation and we're good to go for a lot longer. So there is that biological difference there. Lots of times things like social anxiety is something that's going to affect us in our languages, but it's going to affect us in our other areas of life as well. And find other people who believe that communication is the true importance of language. Because if you're around these people all the time who are telling you have an accent, who are criticizing you for every mistake that you make, who are trying to be competitive, it's not going to help you. And so seriously, these people exist. I recently went to Sicily and I found an amazing group of people. I went on a language retreat and everyone was so patient. And it just gave me like so much hope and so much confidence to then go to Rome and use my Italian with strangers. Find those kinds of people that are going to like build up that confidence in your language and who are going to communicate with you, because that's really what matters. Not your grammar, not your pronunciation. All of that's important and it can lead to better communication, but really communication is the heart of it.
Hi there, people. This is another episode of Diversilíngua. I hope you are here to talk with us because today we have a special guest and we are going to talk with Marta from the United States. Marta has a podcast called Shh, I'm Learning. And we will talk with her about how we can learn language as an introvert, and about the difference between being introverted, and shyness. That's a tricky question. So welcome to the show, Marta.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Before we dive in, I will ask you, our followers, to follow Diversilíngua and to share our content, because with this with those things you can make Diversilíngua even bigger. So now coming back to our beloved guest, Marta. Marta, can you briefly talk about yourself and your podcast?
So I can try. First fun fact about me is that I am autistic. And someone said one time that autistic people speak in paragraphs, not sentences. So sometimes you can ask me like a very simple question and I give you a very long answer, but I will try to be brief. So I am very passionate about languages in general and also about cats and coffee and baseball, other things, random facts.
I love cats, by the way.
Oh yeah, do you have any?
I don't have right now because my landlady, she doesn't allow me to have it, but I have the cats from the street.
Same here.
Yeah.
Same here.
Cats.
But please continue. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine. I love it. So getting back to languages, I feel like I've always been obsessed with different sounds and just differences in how people talk. And I feel like sociolinguistics is in my blood, basically. So linguistics is this huge umbrella, and sociolinguistics is one of the subdisciplines under it. And basically how I break it down to people is it describes how people talk, and it looks at people's attitudes towards different languages and dialects and things like how people talk and write. And it emphasizes how language is a huge part of your identity. And one of the biggest things that I love to talk about in terms of social linguistics is double negatives. For example, like just to give a very brief example, people say all the time, like, you can use double negatives in Portuguese, but you can't in English. Yes, you can. Like, I can say, I ain't said nothing. I just did it, you know? And it's something that, like any non-standard form, it actually gives you more information. Like when you say, I didn't say anything, that's very neutral. But you said, like, I ain't said nothing, is like, you keep telling me, what'd you say? What'd you say? What'd you say? And I'm like exasperated. So there's so much more emotion behind that. And it makes absolutely no sense for someone to say, for example, like 2 negatives make a positive. Like I missed that day in math class. Like they always taught me -2 plus -2 is -4. Like it just makes it more negative. It makes it more intense. And so just talking about that with people when saying like, why do you think this is wrong? Why do you say this is wrong? And just being really curious about the different ways that people talk is something that I'm hugely passionate about, especially because I'm from the South and specifically from North Carolina. And I like to say that I grew up between 2 different dialects. So I'm from Eastern North Carolina, and my mom's side of the family is from Appalachia. And in the US, typically, the South is kind of like, lots of times people sort of make fun of it, and especially strong Southern accents are seen as less intelligent. And so that was always very frustrating for me, and I always felt like I had to sort of moderate my accent, not let it come out too much. And so in part because of that, and in part just because the main part of communication is being understood, I sort of developed this more neutral accent because I want to communicate with people, right? But it was really cool because, you know, I started my podcast and I had what I called my year of introspection to sort of accept my introversion. And then that's the first season of my podcast. And then I had what I called like my time to really sort of accept my roots. And so if you notice my shirt, it says bluegrass, the musical genre, with the instruments that are typically a part of it. And then below it, it has roots. Yeah. And so lots of times people also think of bluegrass as music of like rednecks or hillbillies or whatever. It's also something that's not seen as very positive. And I was like, you know what? I spend so much time being so curious about other people. It's time to embrace my roots and where I'm from and embrace myself and to dispel stereotypes. Like there's so many stereotypes in the world from, you know, like Americans only speak English or people with this accent or dumb or whatever else. And that's also part of the reason why I created my podcast, because in terms of introversion, there's this idea that introverts are like have nothing to say. They're antisocial. They're all shy. And I kept running into lots of issues with that, especially because the first 2 languages that I learned were Spanish and Portuguese. And the stereotype on the other side of those is that they're very loud languages. Like everyone in Latin America is very loud. And so I felt like I had to put on this personality when I spoke those languages, and I didn't feel comfortable. And then there's the fact that my 100% British DNA is very obvious in my face. And so, you know, people would sometimes make uncomfortable comments, and then that would create social anxiety. And I couldn't figure out a way to overcome that. And so I really wanted to, through my podcast, which I call like a place for introverts and other quiet language learners, a place to overcome stereotypes, a place to come and talk about things like, what do you do when you love the language, but you feel like you keep hitting a wall with native speakers? What to do when you don't feel like you fit the personality? What to do when you're over 30? Because also a lot of the language learning advice that I saw was made for and by people in their 20s who are single, no kids, and that's great. But the reality of people is like, there's so many people with families, so many people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s who are still learning languages, and their stories need to be heard too. And there needs to be more advice for people in those stages of life. And what to do if you have lower energy levels in general? What if you don't want to speak the language? And so that's why I created my podcast. We've been through 3 seasons so far. Second season was interviews with other introverted language learners. The third was interviews with language educators. And then I hope to do a fourth one focusing a little bit more specifically on various aspects of mental health. So.
Nice. So awesome. I think Renata has a question regarding the people that you've already interviewed in your podcast.
Yes, because I think you have a lot of lessons to take from those episodes and people that you already interviewed before. So I'd like to ask you, is there any, I don't know, any information you took from it and you said, I'm going to make this part of my life because this is so awesome. I've never thought about that before.
So there's one that really hit me the most. As I mentioned, stereotypes, I understand, exist for a reason. Like, there's so much information in the world and our brains are just trying to understand it. But at the same time, when you feel like you keep being treated as just a stereotype, it's really frustrating. And you're like, what do I do with it? I can't speak for other countries. I can only really speak for the US. But I think the lesson learned can apply to people from anywhere. But, you know, for me with Spanish, it's a language that I started learning when I was 7. It's accompanied me my entire life. And I came from a very conservative family, meaning that everything was forbidden to me. As doubly so because I'm a girl and, you know. And so I decided, okay, I need to take advantage of this. I have monolingual parents. If I learn the second language, the whole world's going to just open up to me. So every book, newspaper, art magazine, TV show, movie I could get my hands on, I was like devouring it. And I thought, this is going to be great. I'm going to grow up and I'm going to have so many friends and it's just going to be this amazing multilingual environment. And in many cases, that's been true. But there's also been so many times when people have told me things like, oh, you spoke Spanish, you speak Spanish, I thought you were just another white girl. Or like, I didn't think you spoke Spanish because you have light colored eyes. Or like, my wife is white and she doesn't speak Spanish, so I just assumed you didn't either. Or like, I'll walk up to someone and I'll be like, hola, soy Marta, ¿cómo estás? Mucho gusto, blah, blah, blah. And their reaction will be like, you speak Spanish?
Mm-hmm.
Or like, I'll go somewhere and I'll order in Spanish and they'll respond in English. And it's like, I don't want to think that there's any like mean intention behind this. But like I said, it created like this social anxiety because I'm just like, there's a 50% chance that I'm going to have a normal conversation and there's a 50% chance that I'm not. And so like, what do I do? And, you know, I say in part this is specific to the US because how like language and race and politics intersect is so complicated. But, you know, I just kept asking people, like, what do I do? Am I doing something wrong? What do I do? And then, like, I'm introverted, so I don't know what to say. And then learning about my selective mutism that comes along as a part of my autism. Like, someone says something and I just stand there, like, staring at them. And that doesn't help the situation either. And so this one teacher, she said that whenever you have a situation where, for example, a language is part of your life or you love it and you feel like you keep hitting a wall with native speakers, try non-native speakers because they don't have that emotional connection that native speakers do. And then interviewing another guest, we brought up the point of, you know, connection's the most important thing. And so if you have to connect in English or Portuguese or whatever language first, do that. And then if it changes to the language that you want to practice, that's cool. So that is the part I feel like has had the biggest impact on me.
Awesome. I was wondering when you said that. I was wondering if you had the same experience with Brazilians, because I talked with an American girl, and she lives in São Paulo, by the way, and she told me that she would like to lose her accent in Portuguese because every time she speaks, people understand that she's a foreigner, and some people try to speak with her in English. So, and she would like to be more unnoticeable among the people, in Brazil. I know that you have already been in Brazil, and I'd like to know if you had the same feeling or not.
So it's really funny. It's really interesting. I think sort of, but not to the same extent. I think because I haven't interacted with as many Brazilians, at least not here. But it is funny because when I started learning Portuguese, so I started learning Portuguese because I went to Brazil when I was 15. And I came back, and when I was there, I was like, man, I can understand so much because of my background in Spanish. I want to learn this language. But back then, we're talking 2005, we didn't have all the resources, things that we have today. So we really only had like these forums where you could leave voice messages. And the idea is that people were going to give you constructive feedback. But when I use that for Portuguese, the majority of the comments that I got on my recordings were things like, this is Portuguese, not Spanish. You have an accent.
Mm.
I was like, I know I have an accent. I'm 15. Like, I'm going to have an accent. Like, come on. But like, tell me what it is. Is it intelligible? Is it not intelligible? Is it a problem? Like, what's going on? And so that's a big reason why I stopped learning Portuguese for a long time. I was like, A, I don't need it. B, there's no one like to practice with in person. And everyone that I find online is just telling me I have an accent. So like I've come and gone with it. Right now, I really only interact with Brazilianing has conversation classes, which are super introvert friendly. I highly recommend those.
I'm curious about something because you mentioned that you decided to learn Spanish when you were 7, right? Am I right?
Well, I had to, but yeah.
But how does that came from?
Uh-huh. So we had to. Like, I didn't know that a lot of people in the US don't start learning a foreign language until they're in high school. Because for us, it was when we were 7. And it was all throughout school. And part of our curriculum in high school was we had to go and teach Spanish to pre-K and kindergarten kids. So by the time I graduated in my school, it was pre-K through 12th grade. We had no choice. There were no other languages offered.
All right.
Got it.
Nice. There is an American that is so famous in Brazil. He has a YouTube channel called Small Advantage, and his name is Gavin. And I've already met this guy face to face, and it's interesting because he started to learn Portuguese, and he started to record some videos and put on the internet. And then the Brazilians got excited because of his accent while he was trying to speak in Portuguese. And then he started to provide some feedback for the audience, like trying to teach them English and some stuff. And now he's pretty famous in Brazil. And it's interesting because people got excited by his accent, and that he was trying to learn Portuguese. And for many people, they thought, why an American is trying to learn Portuguese?
Yeah, we get too excited. The thing is, we get too excited because someone decided to learn Portuguese, and everybody loves this person.
Yeah.
Once they decide to learn Portuguese, I think we have some issues with self-esteem. Maybe we think, oh, nobody wants to learn Portuguese. Why? Some people want to learn Portuguese, so we become curious about that. So that's why some Americans has becoming really famous in Brazil, giving English tips in learning Portuguese at the same time.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and now I will try to ask some other questions. I've already listened to some of your podcast episodes. I've just listen to the last episode that you make like a summary of the third season. And I know that in the first episodes you try to make a distinction between introverted and shy people. Can you briefly explain that to our audience?
Again, I can try because it's really complicated. And I always tell people, like, go read Quiet by Susan Cain, go read The Introvert Advantage. Those books really get into it in a lot of detail, especially from a very like biological perspective. Because if we're talking about introversion, part of the reason why it's so complicated is because it's combines with all these other different aspects of your personality. So each introvert is going to be totally different, and it's like more of a spectrum. So you have some introverts who are closer to the ambivert extrovert side, some who are just like very, very introverted, and it can change as you get older. So depending on how many responsibilities you have, if you have a lot of responsibilities, you might find yourself feeling a lot more introverted. If you're a female, it depends on where you are in your cycle. Different sort of things that really combine based on your mood, how well you slept. You may be feeling a little bit more introverted or extroverted, but there is also, it is just a very like biological thing. And so the degree of introversion may depend on the day, but it generally stays a little bit kind of like stable in general. To get really technical about it, extroverts are very sensitive to dopamine. So, you know, they need like a lot more of it. So they need a lot more interaction, a lot more stimulation. Whereas introverts are more sensitive to this other hormone called like acetylcholine or something. And so we get a little bit of stimulation and we're good to go for a lot longer. So there is that biological difference there. And again, read those books to explain, to get a much better explanation than what I can give. Another really great, a couple of great imageries that I use to explain is that, you know, introversion can be seen as an older cell phone. Not better, not worse, it's just older. And so once you get your fill of social interactions or stimulation, it's like that older cell phone that needs longer to get to that charge. Another example is in terms of coins. So like, whereas an extrovert will wake up in the morning, have 0 coins because they haven't interacted with everyone. As they interact with each person, they get more and more and more coins. And so by the time they go to bed, they have more coins than they started the day with. Whereas introverts tend to start the day with a lot of coins, especially if they have a light, quiet morning. And then every social interaction takes away a coin. And so they go to bed with a lot fewer coins than they started with. And so again, it's not worse, it's not better, it's just different. And so that's a little bit more about like what introversion is. It's something that I think of as more permanent and just biological, and you know, there's that. Shyness is, you have people having different opinions on it. Some people see it as a form of social anxiety. It can, I like to think of it as something more situational. So you basically are kind of like fearful of being seen, of being heard for whatever reason. And so used to what I would do before my diagnosis, because then I was like, I don't think I'm shy. I think I'm just autistic. I would say, do I feel shy? Is it because of what's going on in this moment? Or is it because I'm introverted, my energy's waning away? Because if it's my energy's waning away, then I need to respect that. But if I'm feeling fearful of what the other person will say, I need to try and overcome that. So I hope that sort of makes more sense. I tend to think of introversion as more kind of like permanent. Shyness is more kind of like comes and goes based on the situation.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering if I don't know. I didn't read the books, but uh, don't you think that maybe someone can become an introverted, or the person was born in this way? Because I was wondering about myself, because I think that many years before I was more like an extroverted person, but since I'm getting old, sometimes I feel tired when I'm around a lot of people. I feel like my energy is down, is getting down. So, what do you think about this?
Again, this is part of why it's like so complicated. I've heard that from a lot of people. I've heard even the opposite from my husband, who said he felt like really super introverted when he was a kid, and now he feels a lot more extroverted, right? And also, by the way, one thing I forgot to mention is that, it's totally possible to be extroverted and shy, or introverted and shy. And so he would classify himself more as extroverted and shy. And I've also heard a lot from what you said about people felt more extroverted as a kid and more introverted as they get older. And I've seen that a lot. And, it's kind of like, I tend to think that there's so much evidence of the biological differences. You're born like more introverted or more extroverted. For me, I can tell you that life as a kid just felt so much more easier. Like you would just walk up to somebody and be like, hey, do you want to be my friend for the day? They'd be like, sure. And you can go and hang out. Whereas when you're an adult, you have so many more responsibilities. It's so much harder to make friends. It's so much harder to get together with your friends because, they have families and all these responsibilities. And then as you get older and you take care of your aging parents, you just naturally have less energy to do the things you did when you were a kid. And so, again, I would leave it up to the experts to give their opinions. But what I can say is it's very common. I've heard a lot of stories like yours.
I have another question. I don't know if Renata wants to interact as well. Long time no see you, Renata.
Yeah, long time no see. Well, I was just wondering about the idea for the podcast. Once you're introverted, I still can't imagine how you want to dig in your issue with being an introverted person. So how did this come up?
So it came up as I mentioned part of it earlier in terms of loving languages and learning languages, but always having issues. First of all, like I heard people say all the time that your personality changes when you speak different languages. And I was like, no, I feel introverted in all of them. And once I really embraced that, I felt like it made a difference. And so I sort of wanted to share that with other people in case they were in the same situation. And also, I kept seeing all these language communities having speaking events after speaking events after speaking events. And you go to this speaking event and you don't know anyone and you have to talk with strangers. And how do you talk with strangers? And you do all these small talks. And it's just like, how? And I didn't come across really any information that was telling people like it's okay to not practice speaking, or who was creating speaking events that were a little bit different, or who had like reading clubs or whatever. And so I really wanted to create this space where we could come and connect and just, be more, introverted and talk about like how exhausting it is to talk with people and what do we want to do instead. And and I really wanted to connect, especially with other introverts from Latin America, because, again, you have to dig through, I think, so much loudness, which loud, again, it isn't bad. But I was like, I want an example of like what it's like to be an introvert in these languages. Like, what issues do introverts face in these cultures? What is it like for them? Like, what are maybe some personality traits or techniques that I can adopt to maybe seem more natural in these languages or whatever? Like, I was looking for role models. And for like all my life, I thought, not just in languages, but I thought, okay, something is wrong with me, because you have people say, get out of your shell, get out of your shell, get out of your shell. And that's when, COVID happened and my year of introspection. I started working with this girl in this mastermind to accept your introversion. I started working with this girl who is a language coach, and she said she never practices with other people. And this other, Maria Ortega Garcia, is an amazing language coach from Spain who helps you find your voice and your confidence in Spanish. And I found Jessica Tefengji-Ruel, who works with mindfulness in French. And she had on her profile, like, introverted language teacher. And I was like, that was like the first time I had seen that, you know?
Mhm.
And so I was like, there are different ways to learn languages and to be in different languages, and it is possible. And I was like, I know this podcast is going to be very imperfect, but I want to at least get started with it. And so I hope that answers your question.
I love it,
Yeah.
by the
Yeah,
way.
I'm really impressed by your answer, because I've never thought about not practicing with other people, when you speak about languages, because everybody says just get out of your shell and talk to people. Try new ways to talk to anybody, or you can talk even by yourself, but just talk. But so thinking about that, about those techniques and everything that you've learned from those interviews, so can you give some tips to our audience, or introverted ones at least?
In terms of speaking in general, or something else?
If they want to learn a different language, like, and they are listening to you right now, what would you say for an introverted person?
So, I mean, I would say, first of all, just know that there's nothing wrong with you. And it sounds like really cheesy, but like, seriously, be yourself. There was a time when I was just like following person after person after person on Instagram saying, oh, this is going to be great for immersion. This is going to be great. Well, not only does that create the problem of then like these people get buried under all the other people you start following so that you never see their content, but also like, are they really adding value to your life? And so I started sort of pruning that and cutting away at that. And it's really kind of cool once you focus on what lights you up, once you focus on the people that make you feel good in the language. Like if there are people that make you feel bad in the language, go away, walk away. You're not obligated to talk to them. Like it's something I had to learn the hard way. Hopefully a lot of other people have an easier way with that. But like not everyone is for you, and that's okay. That applies in language too. Like don't force yourself to talk to someone just because they speak this language and you want to learn it. Like if this isn't someone that you would speak to if you weren't speaking to them just to learn the language, like you don't have to talk to them. It's okay. And once I started doing that, for example, I started finding other accounts that like really just light me up, and I really pay attention to them, and I feel like my language gets stronger because of that. There are lots of accounts out there and lots of people that you can practice with that, may be harder to find, but you can find them. So there's like, for example, Speak in Spades on Instagram. She has amazing followers and amazing content, and she has reading and writing challenges. So not everything is speaking. And she breaks you up into different groups, and you connect with other like-minded language learners, and you get to practice your reading and your writing, and it's a fantastic environment. There are creators like No Chavez Nada, who's an introvert from Mexico City, who creates this content on TikTok and Instagram about linguistics and false etymologies and all these things that are just amazing, And so when we learn languages, I think lots of times we get caught up by the possibilities. But it's like, no. Like, just focus on what you need. Focus on what you're actually going to use. Focus on who is going to be a positive influence in your life. And remember that you are a person. If you need to go to therapy, go to therapy. I mean, lots of times things like social anxiety is something that's going to affect us in our languages, but it's going to affect us in our other areas of life as well. Mm-hmm. And find other people who believe that communication is the true importance of language. Because if you're around these people all the time who are telling you have an accent, who are criticizing you for every mistake that you make, who are trying to be competitive, it's not going to help you. And so seriously, these people exist. I recently went to Sicily and I found an amazing group of people. I went on a language retreat and everyone was so patient. And it just gave me like so much hope and so much confidence to then go to Rome and use my Italian with strangers. Find those kinds of people that are going to like build up that confidence in your language and who are going to communicate with you, because that's really what matters. Not your grammar, not your pronunciation. All of that's important, and it can lead to better communication, but really communication is the heart of it.
It's interesting that you mentioned about the language events, and I've already been in 3 different languages events. One of the events are Poliglota, a polyglot conference in Brazil that I helped to organize to build this conference. And nowadays I'm not organizing it anymore, but I was one of the creators. And then Polyglot Conference and Polyglot Gathering. In the Polyglot Gathering, I was online, and I met a lot of people there, and I've made some friends there that afterwards I could meet those people in person. This was back in the pandemic. And in Polyglot Conference, I went to the last event in Budapest last year. And what I realized in those events is that there are a lot of introverted polyglots, a lot of people that are introverted. And I think it sometimes it makes me think that the majority of people there are introverted. And then they tried to speak with some people, and I was wondering, because when I went to those events, sometimes I felt like an introverted, because I'd like to speak with some people, but not with all people. And sometimes I didn't like the big events, like a dinner with a lot of people, because I felt like shy. I don't know if it was shyness or as an introversion. I don't know your opinion. I know that you are not an specialist about this, but what would you say about those feelings that I had?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, I would like to say that you bring up a really good point, and that, of course, I'm not saying never go to speaking events. I think when you do things that you're probably less comfortable with, like speaking events, know what you're going for, know what your purpose is, and then stick to that. And so if you say, if I go to this and I talk with one person, I'm good. Don't go and try and talk with everybody. If you know that's going to be like detrimental, don't do it. Find that one person, and that is great. As far as, is it introversion, is it shyness in those situations? Yeah, it's a good question. It really could be either one. It could be introversion because, you've interacted, or you've even just being around all these people that you don't know all day can really just wear your battery down. And you're just like, I just want to go to the hotel room because I need time to recoup. Like I'm done. And it could be shyness if you're just like, I don't know what these people are going to think about me. I'm scared to go and talk with them. So, depending on what exactly the thoughts and feelings are, it really could be either one.
All right. Thank you. Now I'd like to start a new part of our podcast before we continue. We are trying to start a new part that it's called lingua trivia, and in this part we usually try to bring some content, a trivia that might interest our audience. So today I'd like to talk about the sentence "long time no see" that usually people say when it's when it's been a while that you haven't seen the person. And I looked at the dictionary.com, and it says that probably it was like a wrong translation from a Chinese sentence, or maybe a Native American sentence. And nowadays people say that, and it's implied that you are talking about that it's been a while that you haven't seen the person. So, and then there are some alternatives to that. I haven't seen you in a while. It's been such a long time since we've seen each other. And that's it for the lingua trivia. And then coming back to our interview. Uh, we've already talked about your experience in Brazil a little bit, but I noticed that it seems, I think that in one of the episodes you mentioned that, and you were in the northeast of Brazil. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes, I was.
Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
So it started with a lie, which I will be bitter about until forever. So a missionary came to my parents' church and said, "Hey guys, I need y'all to go on a mission trip with me to Brazil. If you go, you will be able to eat cake for breakfast." I have no idea what that has to do with anything. All I know is I was 15. I had little control over my life. All I wanted to do was like do things like eating cake for breakfast. So that's
I would do
honestly
the same. I would accept right away because I
Yeah, I
love
would
food.
accept it. Would accept it.
yes, exactly. So that's why I went. And so yeah, we were in Paraíba. I don't remember the exact name of the town we were in. It was 9 days and it was amazing. Like being there. And back then I had a much bigger heat tolerance. And so I thought, wow, like 80 degrees in the winter is amazing. Now I'm like too Scandinavian for that. I'm like, I need cold.
I don't like either.
yeah. And I was 15. And so it's like crazy because everyone's like, oh, what do you think about like the coffee and this and that? And I'm like, I was 15. Like I was not drinking coffee back then. So, I feel like I have to go back and try all these things. But the place that we were staying at, there was this 9-year-old boy and his little brother. And we just became like the best of friends. And so that's honestly like a big reason why I learned Portuguese too. Because I was like, dude, I want to be able to talk with you. And so we were just like following each other around, and it was really awesome. I loved it a lot, and I really want to go back and explore all kinds of different places because it's also a huge country. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And
So
also, uh, you talked about the accent that you have from the south of the United States, and there are those difference in Brazil as well. Like in the northeast of Brazil, sometimes I felt a little bit shy because of my accent, because it's not the most spread accent in Brazil because of the media and everything. And sometimes I felt like, oh, is there something wrong with my accent? But nowadays I'm more proud of my accent, and there are people that spread this idea that you must be proud for the accent that you have, no matter which region you come from in Brazil, because the country is so huge and there are those differences. But I'm sorry to interrupt you, Renata. What you were saying?
well, I don't know if I'm going to give you a hard time by asking you that, but can you speak some Portuguese to us?
I don't know it.
I know I put you in trouble, so if you don't want to, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I just want to see you in action a little bit, but you
I mean,
know,
we can have a conversation.
it's up to
It's
you.
just like when people say something, I'm like, what do you want me to say? Like, I don't know.
Como você está?
Eu tô muito bem. Obrigada. E você?
Eu estou bem. Eu estou muito feliz de tê-la conosco nesta entrevista. Espero que esteja gostando e diga alô para o nosso público brasileiro.
Ah, sim, eu sou muito feliz de estar aqui e quero dizer que amo o Brasil, o português e a literatura, a cultura, a música. Muito obrigada por tudo e é, isso, não sei o que dizer.
You
Tá
rock it!
ótimo.
You rock it!
Tá ótimo. Você arrasou. Em bom português, você arrasou. You nailed it. You rock it.
So, and now before we conclude our episode, we always ask our guest to give a cultural recommendation to our listeners. Can you recommend a book, a movie, a TV show, or any cultural thing to our listeners? This is the cultural moment of Diversilíngua.
So this is like a really hard question because it's like I can't recommend just one thing. There's like so many things. There's, for example, especially since I'm wearing this shirt, I have to talk about Larry and Joe. They're a duo that started, I don't know how long ago, but basically Joe is from North Carolina and Larry's from Venezuela. And they make, I forget the name that they gave to the music, but it's kind of like a combination of Venezuelan music and bluegrass. And it's like so amazing, especially when you hear people like talking like bad things about, you know, certain areas of the US and bluegrass and whatever, to like see someone appreciate this music and come and create something new. It's just absolutely amazing. And so go check it out, please help them out. And I already mentioned No Chavez Nada. So his videos are all in Spanish, but he has like a book list on Goodreads, all these different books in English and Spanish. And even I think there's one in Portuguese about language and social linguistics and forensic linguistics and things like that. And he has a couple of his books on the way and podcasts coming. And he just gave a talk, I think 2 days ago, about orthographic classism. Like he's just amazing. And as far as books, like I have a few here because I'm really partial to them. There's one, it's called Talkin' Tar Heel, and hopefully you can maybe see it a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm partial to it because I helped work on it when I was in my master's, and the couple professors, the authors here were a couple of professors I had. But it really goes into the dialects of North Carolina. It talks about the origins of language diversity in North Carolina, talking country and city, how they talk in the Outer Banks, how they talk in the mountains, African American speech, the legacy of American Indian languages, Lumbee English, Latino Tar Heels, celebrating language diversity. Like it's just one state, not all 50, but there's so much in North Carolina. There's so much. We have so many immigrants from so many different places. And it's just really cool to see all that there is in the state. It's a little bit academic, but it's really good. And then in Portuguese, this one, I still have to read all of it. You can't really see it very well.
A língua de Eulalia.
Yeah.
Mm.
I haven't finished it, so if it's awful, please edit this out. But it's a sociolinguistic novel of Brazilian Portuguese. And then this one is Se habla español, ¿cuál? And again, I need to fix my background.
Yeah, I think it's better when you put together your body with your body.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So it's Se habla español, ¿cuál? Because, and I think it does just Latin American Spanish, but with all the differences, like there's 500 words for straw and like 5,000 words for pig. Just all the differences. It's really cool to read about it and to see what they like, different words that people have for different things in different dialects.
It's so clear. It's so clear. You're so social linguistic person.
So much.
Because you like dialects, you like the differences and how different people talk in different places. Yeah. That's so social linguistics.
It's like it just, to me, it reflects like our creativity and just how many different ways there are of thinking and doing things. And it's so amazing. Cool. And I feel like it needs more attention. There's also Speak in Tongues Pod, the podcast. She does an episode every week, and she has, have you been on it or seen it or?
Yeah,
yeah.
We've been there, and we interviewed the Ellie, I think. Her name.
So that book, which is amazing to combine, like to make like languages like a physical, tangible thing with her cookbook with like the 15 recipes all connected to a culture and a language. So that is great that you guys have already been connected. But yeah, I highly recommend that. And then if someone wants to nerd out with English, there's a YouTube channel called Lost in the Pond, and he goes into differences between Britain and the US in terms of culture and language. So stuff like that is really cool.
By the way, did you study social linguistics for your master?
I did.
All right, nice.
So, in case it's not a little bit
That's
obvious.
so clear.
Yeah. But, and I think part of it comes from my background too, because it's like, I don't want anybody telling me how I talk, like my accent, my dialect, my family's dialect is wrong. Like, I'm not going to tell you that it's how you talk is wrong. Like, that's just rude. And, you know, just because something is not standard, it doesn't mean it's wrong. And it's kind of like yesterday when I was watching the interview that Adrian Chavez from No Chavez Nada did, he was saying, like, is it really that, you know, you think that these people talk wrong or that they talk wrong? Or is it your attitude about these people? You're projecting that onto how they talk. Like, there's like, tell me why it's wrong.
Yeah, and something really pointless is to criticize accents because everybody has one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It points out exactly where you come from. It's part of your identity. So it's not something that you can like erase. There's no such thing as people with no accent.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah. Nice. And I will leave the last question for Renata.
Okay. If you could choose any language to speak right away, what would it be? And I'd like you to choose a language you don't speak yet.
To be honest, it really would depend. If we're talking in terms of heritage, it would be Welsh, because when I did my DNA test, I knew there was going to be Scottish. I knew there was going to be Irish. I knew there was going to be English. But the Welsh, and to see so much of it there was just like, what? It was so cool. So in terms of heritage, it would be Welsh. But in terms of practicality, it would be Danish, because I want to move to Denmark. And so if anyone has connections, please let me know how to do that, or possible jobs and whatever. But honestly, like, the first language that popped into my mind was Quechua or Nahuatl. Quechua, because I've only come into contact with it with some taster lessons in the online version of the Polyglot Conference. But just the language's history, and I associate it as a language of the mountains, and so I really like that. And I struggle to really explain why I like it so much, but I really do. And then my husband's from Mexico, and so learning more about Mexico's history and the indigenous languages there, I would honestly also say Nahuatl would be a close second. And it's something that for me is just like so insane, because I think Quechua and Nahuatl are so beautiful that I just say, like, how did the Spanish and the Portuguese and the English come over and say, no, you're going to speak my language? Like, how? Why? These languages are so cool.
Yeah, we do also have some languages in Brazil that were forgotten because of the colonization and everything.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, for example, Guarani, for example, is not given much attention. The Paraguayan Guarani, it is, because it's Paraguay's official language, but the Brazilian version of Guarani, for example, you don't see much. You don't see people like speaking or make books about it, or fostering the interests of people. So I remember that some time ago, Duolingo decided to launch new languages, especially those rare ones that came from native peoples. But people were complaining about the Brazilian version of Guarani. But the thing is, there's not much information. There's not many people speaking Brazilian Guarani than the Paraguayan Guarani. So what can we do about that? Just reinforce that we need to focus on our native languages and have more people to speak them.
Yeah, there is also Nhangatu. That is
Nyangatu too.
Yeah,
It's a modern version of Tupi, Old
Yeah.
Tupi, right?
yeah.
Mhm.
And other
Nice.
ones, and like
Nice.
hundreds of other ones.
So it was wonderful to talk with you, Marta. Thanks for coming to our podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been great. People can find my podcast on any major platform, so Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon/Audible, and I am on Instagram at SHHH _ I'm learning all together. IMLEARNING. And I'm always happy to hear from people. And so, yeah, please reach out.
That's it for another episode of Diversilíngua, where we explore the fascinating world of language, culture, and travel. And I thank you all for tuning in and joining us on this journey of discovery. Don't forget to follow us on social media. And also, if you are listening to our episode on Spotify, please give us a star. That's really help us to reach more people. Thank you, Marta. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Marta. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Same.